Okay, so now, for the first time in a generation, we're facing an existential threat from outside of our country. And I don't think the vast majority of people in our country realize that what's happening in Ukraine is an existential threat to the United States. Now, don't misunderstand me here. I want to be very clear. I am not propagating the narrative that Republicans like Mitt Romney and Mitch McConnell propagate, where McConnell says, what's happening in Ukraine, or our military support of Ukraine, is the most important issue of our time. That's not true. It shows how out of touch Mitch McConnell is. It shows where his priorities lie. That is not what I'm talking about. I am not interested in defending Ukraine because they are some sort of example of a good democracy. No, they're not. They're one of the most corrupt nations around the world, and they have very corrupt ties to the United States, especially through the Biden family. We all know all of that. We know Hunter Biden was paid a ton of money to be on the board of an energy company in Ukraine. Conveniently, when his father was vice president and Ukraine wanted something from his father, oh, well, coincidental. No, Ukraine is used by corrupt politicians and corrupt business people in the United States as essentially a place for money laundering. And Ukraine thinks that they can squeeze more money out of the United States because they can hold that over our head. And to a certain extent, that's true, right? Let me see. We just gave $350 million more to Ukraine. $350 million. It's hard for me to even fathom what that amount of money looks like if you were to put it all in one stack. Like, how many planes, how many pallets of cash? Remember when Obama sent those pallets of cash to Iran? Unmarked planes carrying unmarked bills, and he just sent the cash, like the hard cash, the bills. Imagine that being sent to Ukraine, $350 million. That's just one of the payments. There have been like dozens of payments that the US government, the Congress, and Biden unilaterally has given to Ukraine. We've given them something like $35 billion so far. For what? For what? We've given them some of our best military equipment. We've been fighting a proxy war against Russia is what we've been doing. This is what we've been doing, is we've been fighting this proxy war against Russia. And there's a lot of reasons that a lot of conservatives have opposed the war in Ukraine. And these are good reasons, and these are valid reasons. Some of them have to do with just the money itself that I'm talking about, this unlimited amount of money that just flows directly to Zelensky. And there's no audit. We don't know what he's actually spending this money on. Some of it is earmarked. We send it in the form of quote unquote military aid, which sometimes is just cash and sometimes is our military equipment that we're essentially giving them for free. And we just say, like, this is how much the equipment we gave you is worth. Therefore, when we say we're sending money, it's really we're sending them goods that are worth that amount of money. But there's been no audit. We have no idea if this is being used corruptly. Given who Zelensky is, given what Ukraine is, I think it's undoubted. It's simply undoubtedly being used for corrupt purposes. Of course it is. And a lot of conservatives don't want this blank check being written to Ukraine because it's awful, especially when we can't even secure our own border. I mean, what's happening in Ukraine is essentially a border dispute between Ukraine and Russia. And Vladimir Putin is wrong to invade. There's not very many people that are defending Vladimir Putin. It's wrong. He's an imperialist because, he's a former KGB agent. He's a former Soviet. He's never disavowed that ideology. There's no reason to think that he's anything other than basically a Bolshevik imperialist. That's how he behaves, and that's wrong. It's immoral. He shouldn't do that. However, it's still, even if that's what Putin is, it's still a dispute over a border in Ukraine. And we can't even secure our own border. We claim we don't have the money to do that, and yet we're trying to secure the border of Ukraine against an invasion by Russia. That doesn't make a lot of sense to a lot of conservatives who oppose the Ukraine war because of that, and that's a very good reason. Also, this amount of money, when I'm talking about these planes, like this picturing in my head how much money this is, how much cash this is, it's also impossible for me not to compare that amount of money to what it could do here domestically in the United States. When governors across the country locked down our economy in the name of COVID and people lost their life savings, they lost their livelihoods, their businesses were ruined or closed down forever, this amount of money belongs to the American people. This amount of money could save the American people from the devastation that we have experienced. The inflation that we are suffering in the United States right now is mostly due to Joe Biden printing this money to give to Ukraine. And by printing that money, it devalues our currency, which causes inflation, which costs us more, which means that essentially we are paying, you and I are paying out of our pocket to give this money to Zelensky and Ukraine, while the US government is preventing us or prevented us from pursuing our livelihoods, making a living, and making money. It's grotesque. And many people rightfully oppose the war in Ukraine on those grounds. We also don't want more endless wars. How many endless wars have we been involved in that we haven't won decisively because of our own choices? The anniversary of the Iraq War just passed 20 years in Iraq. We could have won that war. We should have won that war. No, let me pause. Let me go back. We shouldn't have entered that war. That war was based on faulty intelligence and political interests. But once we were there, we could have won that war. But we didn't because of domestic politics here at home that essentially prohibited the military from being able to decisively end that war. In fact, I read James Mattis's book after it came out, and I read it because I wanted to hear what he had to say about Trump. But one of the most interesting parts of General Mattis's book was talking about being in Iraq during the time when Iraq should have been completed, when the war in Iraq should have been won, and how Obama and Joe Biden specifically stopped the US military from being able to win the war in Iraq. The American people don't want that again. We saw our sons and our brothers and our husbands and our dads, people that we grew up with and went to school with. We saw young men across our country die in Iraq while politicians didn't give them the tools that they needed to actually win that war. We saw so much money be spent on Iraq that, again, we had the same reaction when all this money was being spent on Iraq and not spent on us, when victory was never the goal in the eyes of the politicians that were orchestrating Iraq here. People oppose the war in Ukraine on these same grounds. We don't want any more endless wars. Also, what's happening in Ukraine, it's perfectly fine to say that it's a lose-lose. It's perfectly fine to say, well, it really sucks that Vladimir Putin is probably not going to stop his invasion. He's not going to agree to any peace deal unless Ukraine gives away some of their sovereignty. That sucks. That's bad. I don't like that. I wish Ukraine didn't have to give away some of their sovereignty. They're going to have to, though. Any realist, you can pretend that there's some utopian outcome where Ukraine emerges victorious. Ukraine does not have to give away any of their geography and Russia backs off. But let me tell you, if you believe that, then I have a bridge to sell you, because that's never going to happen. And the reason it's not going to happen is because we shouldn't have been in this position in the first place. Hi guys, it's Liz Wheeler. Don't forget to watch my show, The Liz Wheeler Show, every night at 7 p.m. on the First TV. You can download the free First TV app, or you can visit thefirsttv.com/Liz and start watching today.